There is a very specific moment in the life of every survivor of narcissistic abuse. It is a moment so quiet on the outside, yet so seismic on the inside, that it can feel as if the ground has shifted beneath your feet without anyone else even noticing. It is the precise moment when the person who has been controlling your reality looks at you and realizes, perhaps for the first time, that you finally see them. You no longer see the carefully curated version of them, nor the charming mask, the wounded hero, the misunderstood partner, or the endlessly patient friend. You see the pattern, you see the manipulation, you see the cold strategy hidden beneath the affection. And in that singular instant, something in their eyes shifts, because the illusion they have spent so much energy maintaining has just cracked, and they know it. You might have felt it as a sudden, sharp chill in the room, a strange and heavy pause in the conversation, or a flicker of something that looks almost like panic hidden behind their usual composure. That moment is one of the most dangerous and at the same time, one of the most clarifying junctures in the entire arc of narcissistic abuse. Understanding what happens next is essential because it can change the entire trajectory of your healing process forever. Before we go any deeper into this, if you are someone who is truly committed to protecting your peace, reclaiming your sense of identity, and understanding the hidden, complex mechanics of manipulative relationships, please consider subscribing to this channel. Everything that is shared here is firmly grounded in psychological insight, trauma-informed care, and the lived realities of survivors who are currently learning how to trust themselves again. By choosing to subscribe, you are giving yourself consistent, reliable access to the kind of knowledge that quietly, piece by piece, rebuilds your inner world. You receive one truthful insight at a time, and you become part of a community of people who are consciously choosing clarity over confusion and self-respect over the cycle of self-doubt. Now, let us return to that pivotal, life-altering moment, because what happens inside the narcissistic person when they realize that you finally know the truth is not random? It follows a very recognizable psychological pattern, even though it may manifest in different ways from one individual to another. At the very core of narcissistic functioning is a desperate need to maintain a carefully constructed self-image, one that depends heavily on the constant perception and validation of others. When you begin to see through that image, you are no longer reflecting back the version of them they need in order to feel stable. In their internal world, you suddenly become a threat. This is not because you have become aggressive or because you are being cruel. Rather, it is because your clarity directly disrupts the mirror they have been relying on to regulate their own fragile sense of self. And when that mirror cracks, their reaction is rarely calm or reasonable. The first shift you will likely notice is an intensification of the very behaviors that kept you confused in the first place. Gaslighting becomes more aggressive, more frequent, and more inventive. Suddenly, conversations that you clearly remember are being rewritten right in front of you. Events that you have documented are completely denied. Feelings that you expressed openly are reframed as overreactions or as evidence of your own imagined wounds. This escalation is not a sign that you are wrong or that your memory is failing. Instead, it is a clear sign that your accuracy has become absolutely unbearable to them. The more precisely you understand the dynamic, the harder they must work to destabilize your perception, because your stable perception is the single thing they cannot control through charm alone. Alongside the gaslighting, you will often see a surge of blame shifting and projection. Behaviors that they themselves have engaged in are suddenly attributed to you. You become the manipulator, the cold one, the unstable one, or the person who simply cannot let go of the past. This is not always a conscious, calculated form of deception. In many cases, it reflects a deep and rigid psychological defense in which the narcissistic individual simply cannot tolerate the version of themselves you are now seeing. Therefore, they psychologically transplant those unwanted traits onto you. It is an unconscious attempt to preserve their internal self-image by forcing you to carry the weight of what they refuse to acknowledge within themselves. Then comes the performance of victimhood. This is one of the most disorienting stages of all, because the person who has caused you so much pain begins to speak as though they are the one being destroyed. They may cry, they may speak in soft and gentle tones, and they may recount their own suffering in immense detail. They may invoke their difficult childhood, their current life stress, their fragile mental state, or their profound fear of losing you. While it is true that genuine pain can exist within narcissistic individuals, the specific timing of this performance is what reveals its true function. It almost always appears precisely when accountability is approaching, precisely when your clarity is at its strongest, and precisely when you are closest to finally walking away. The victim narrative is not necessarily a lie within their own mind, but it is a strategic tool that consistently arrives whenever their control is slipping. If that performance of victimhood does not work to pull you back, you will often see intimidation rise in its place. This may be overt, such as raised voices, direct threats, or aggressive posturing, or it may be much more subtle, such as cold stares, long periods of silence, ominous statements, or a sudden withdrawal of warmth that feels almost like a punishment. The silent treatment, in particular, is one of the most psychologically destabilizing tools because it activates the human nervous system's deep-seated fear of abandonment, while simultaneously denying you any opportunity to resolve the issue. It is a form of emotional pressure designed specifically to make you doubt your decision to see things clearly. And then, almost paradoxically, the warmth returns. This is the stage that many survivors find to be the most confusing of all. After the rage, after the silence, and after the cold cruelty, the narcissistic person may suddenly become the most loving and attentive version of themselves you have ever seen. This is often referred to as hoovering, a term that captures how this behavior effectively pulls you back into the relational vacuum. The compliments become extravagant, the apologies sound rehearsed yet deeply emotional, and the promises of change feel almost entirely convincing. There may be gifts, grand gestures, references to shared memories, or sudden displays of vulnerability that seem to confirm everything you ever hoped for regarding who they could be. This is known as intermittent reinforcement, and it is one of the most powerful conditioning forces in all of human psychology. Unpredictable rewards delivered after long periods of pain create much stronger emotional bonds than consistent kindness ever could. This is exactly why trauma bonds feel so chemical and so gravitational, even after you understand exactly what is happening. Understanding this is essential because survivors often blame themselves for struggling to leave even after they finally see the truth. They wonder why this new clarity has not immediately freed them, and they wonder why their heart still aches for someone their mind has correctly identified as harmful. The answer is not that you are weak. The answer is that your nervous system has been shaped by months or years of these unpredictable emotional patterns. It has learned to associate relief, hope, and connection with the very person who caused the distress in the first place. Healing, therefore, requires not only intellectual understanding, but also a slow, patient retraining of your body's physical response to that bond. Meanwhile, outside of your private dynamic, another pattern often begins to unfold. Image management intensifies significantly. The narcissistic person becomes increasingly invested in how they appear to others, especially to mutual friends, family members, coworkers, or even their online audience. You may notice subtle storytelling that paints them as the reasonable, patient one, and you as the difficult, irrational one. In more severe cases, this escalates into a full-scale smear campaign where carefully chosen narratives are spread to people in your shared social world. The purpose is rarely just simple revenge. The deeper purpose is to control the narrative before your version of events can take root. If they can define who you are first, your clarity becomes much easier for others to dismiss. This is the moment when many survivors feel a profound and painful sense of isolation because the people they once trusted may begin treating them differently. It is incredibly painful and disorienting. However, it is also one of the most important times to remember that the truth does not require universal agreement to be valid. Your reality is not any less real simply because someone else has been told a different, fabricated story. Your healing does not depend on convincing anyone else of the truth. It depends entirely on knowing what you know and continuing to live in alignment with that knowing. If this is resonating with you and you want to keep building the kind of inner clarity that manipulation cannot easily reach, please take a moment to subscribe. This channel is intentionally designed for survivors who are ready to move beyond the fog of confusion and into a deeper understanding of themselves, their patterns, and the complex psychological dynamics that shape their life experiences. Every video is an invitation for you to reclaim a little more of the self that was quietly taken from you, and to rebuild that self on a foundation that cannot be easily manipulated again. Now, let us turn inward. While the external behavior of the narcissistic person is certainly important to understand, what is happening inside of you during this stage is far more important. When you first recognize the reality of the manipulation, the feeling is rarely one of pure relief. More often, it is a strange and deeply unsettling mixture of clarity and grief, awareness and confusion, validation and disorientation. You may feel as though you are finally waking up inside of a dream that you cannot quite remember, with fragments of memory suddenly clicking into place in ways that feel almost too painful to hold. Please know that this is entirely normal. This is your mind reorganizing itself around a truth that it was previously not safe enough to see. Clarity in the beginning often feels frightening rather than empowering because it requires you to grieve not only for the relationship itself, but also for the version of reality you truly believed you were living in. You are moving through a difficult transition, and the disorientation you feel is a sign of your growth, not a failure of your strength. You are reclaiming your mind, your memories, and your right to define your own life. And that is a profound act of courage that will eventually lead you to a place of genuine, lasting peace. Stay patient with yourself as you navigate these layers of understanding, and keep trusting the reality that you are uncovering, because that is the path back to yourself. You grieve the person you genuinely thought they were. You grieve the future you once carefully imagined. You grieve all the energy you poured into the relationship, and you grieve the various parts of yourself that you suppressed or distorted just to keep the dynamic functioning. Underneath all of that, you may even find yourself mourning the version of who you were before this experience fundamentally reshaped you. This heavy sense of grief is not a sign that you are weak or that you are confused. It is actually a sign that you are processing something incredibly real and significant. Alongside that grief, you might notice a sudden surge of self-doubt that feels almost paradoxical. You finally see the truth clearly, yet you find yourself questioning your own judgment more than ever. This happens because prolonged exposure to gaslighting effectively teaches your nervous system to distrust its own internal signals. Even when your conscious mind has finally connected the dots, your body may still instinctively flinch at the idea of trusting your own perceptions. Healing this is not about forcing yourself to feel absolute certainty immediately. It is about gently and repeatedly choosing to believe yourself in small, manageable moments until that sense of self-trust becomes a stable inner pattern rather than just an occasional brave act. This is also why the simple practice of documenting reality becomes such a quietly powerful tool. Writing down events as they happen, keeping records of specific conversations, and noting your feelings in real time creates an external memory that cannot be rewritten by someone else later. This is not about building a legal case against them. It is about anchoring yourself firmly in your own actual experience. That way, whenever manipulation attempts to distort your memory, you have something steady and factual to return to. This practice is one of the most underrated tools in the entire recovery process because it slowly, methodically rebuilds the broken relationship between you and your own perception. As you continue on this path of healing, you will begin to notice a distinct difference between genuine accountability and mere manipulative performance. Learning to spot this distinction is one of the most liberating insights you can possibly develop. Genuine accountability is consistent. It does not appear only when their access to you is threatened. It does not center the feelings of the person who actually caused the harm, and it certainly does not require you to immediately forgive or forget. Instead, true accountability shows up in changed behavior over a long period of time, in their patience with your healing journey, in the total absence of pressure, and in a genuine willingness to sit with discomfort without demanding that you provide immediate resolution. Manipulative performance, by sharp contrast, is almost always characterized by a sense of urgency. It needs you to respond right now. It needs you to soften your stance. It needs you to reopen the door. It uses the language of vulnerability as a strategic tool rather than as an honest, open expression of the heart. Once you truly learn to feel the difference between these two things, The performance loses much of its power because you stop confusing that high-stakes emotional intensity with actual emotional truth. You will also begin to recognize the common cycles of temporary change that often follow the moment they realize you are onto them. The narcissistic person may genuinely seem to behave differently for a few days, a few weeks, or even a few months. They might attend therapy, read books about relationships, speak the language of healing, and appear to have been completely transformed. Then, slowly, the old patterns return. They are often more subtle than they were before, often more sophisticated, and often more difficult to clearly name. This is not always a deliberate, conscious deception. In some cases, the change is real, but it remains shallow and is sustained only for as long as it is required to regain access to you. True transformation is rare, slow, and rarely announces itself with fanfare. It does not ask for credit. It simply unfolds over the course of many years, quietly and without any need for performance. While all of this is happening, it is absolutely essential to protect your nervous system. Emotional regulation is not just a luxury during this stage of your recovery. It is a vital survival skill. Practices such as slow, deep breathing, grounding yourself through your physical senses, gentle movement, spending time in nature, getting restful sleep, and limiting your exposure to overstimulation all help your body remember what true safety feels like. You do not need to push yourself to heal quickly or meet a specific deadline. You need to provide your system with the right conditions in which healing can naturally occur. The body recovers in its own rhythms, not according to an external schedule. Boundaries become another quiet but essential pillar of your recovery. A boundary is not a wall, and it is certainly not a punishment. It is a clear, firm statement of what you will and will not participate in, held firmly without any need for the other person's agreement or approval. With narcissistic individuals, boundaries are often tested repeatedly. Sometimes they try to break them through charm, sometimes through anger, and sometimes through guilt. Remember that the true strength of a boundary is not measured by how the other person responds to it, but by how consistently you honor it within yourself. Over time, this consistency rebuilds the inner authority that manipulation tried so hard to erode. It is also very important to avoid unnecessary confrontation during this specific stage. Many survivors feel a strong, overwhelming urge to explain themselves, to prove their perceptions, and to make the narcissistic person finally understand the depth of what they have done. This impulse is deeply human, and it is rooted in the desperate hope that being recognized will finally bring you closure. But closure in this context rarely comes from the other person. It comes from within. Engaging in repeated confrontations often only provides them with new material for further manipulation, new opportunities for distortion, and new openings for emotional escalation. Sometimes, the most powerful response is a quiet one. Sometimes the most liberating choice you can make is to stop trying to be understood by someone whose understanding has never been a safe place for you to land. Rebuilding your identity is perhaps the most tender part of this entire journey. After experiencing such prolonged manipulation, many survivors realize they no longer fully recognize who they are. Your preferences, your opinions, your dreams, and even your small daily habits may have been carefully shaped to accommodate someone else's moods and expectations. Reclaiming your identity is a slow, curious process of asking yourself small, meaningful questions. What do you actually enjoy doing? What do you actually believe to be true? What kind of rest does your body truly need? What kind of people make you feel more like yourself rather than less? These questions, when asked gently and frequently, begin to restore the inner landscape that was quietly rearranged without your full conscious consent. Self-validation then becomes the firm foundation of this restoration. For a long time, you may have felt that you needed external confirmation just to feel certain about your own experiences. Healing involves learning to offer that confirmation to yourself. When a memory surfaces, you can acknowledge it. When a feeling arises, you can honor it. When your intuition speaks to you, you can listen to it without requiring external proof. This does not mean you become closed to constructive feedback. It simply means you stop outsourcing your reality to people who have shown they will consistently distort it. Support systems matter enormously during this time, but the quality of that support matters far more than the quantity. A small number of people who can listen without judgment, who can hold space for you without trying to fix you, and who can believe you without needing to know every single detail are worth far more than a large circle of well-meaning but confused observers. Professional support from trauma-informed therapists, when it is accessible to you, can be especially valuable because the patterns of narcissistic abuse are specific and benefit greatly from specialized professional understanding. As your clarity strengthens, you will begin to notice red flags much earlier in your future interactions, not with a sense of paranoia, but with a sense of quiet, calm discernment. You will sense when someone's words do not actually match their actions. You will notice when affection starts to feel conditional rather than free. You will recognize when curiosity about you is actually just information gathering. You will feel the distinct difference between people who respect your boundaries and people who habitually test them. This is not hypervigilance. This is wisdom being slowly integrated into your body, becoming a natural part of how you move through the world. If you have made it this far and you feel something inside you beginning to settle, beginning to clarify, and beginning to remember itself, I want to invite you once more to subscribe and stay close to this work. Healing from narcissistic abuse is not a single lightning bolt revelation. It is a long, layered, and deeply personal process, and having steady, thoughtful guidance along the way can make a truly meaningful difference. This channel exists for exactly that reason: to walk beside you through the difficult stages of recovery, to offer clear language for experiences that have long felt unspeakable, and to remind you that emotional freedom is not only possible but is already beginning even now in the quiet way you are choosing to understand yourself more deeply. Remember that knowledge is not the end of healing, but it is the true beginning of freedom. The very moment you understood the manipulation was the moment its grip began to loosen. Even if your heart has not yet fully caught up with your mind, the narcissistic person may continue to react, to escalate, to soften, to perform, to disappear and return, to rewrite the past, and to reshape the present. But none of that defines your recovery. Your recovery is defined by the slow, steady return to yourself. It is defined by the moments when you choose your own perception over their distorted narrative. It is defined by the quiet decisions to rest, to grieve, to grow, and to live in alignment with the truth you have finally allowed yourself to see. As you continue along this path, you will discover that the most profound transformation is not in them, and it never was. It is in you. It is in the way you are learning to inhabit your own life again with a depth of self-trust that no manipulation can ever fully reach. And that depth will keep expanding quietly and powerfully long after this chapter finally comes to an end.